Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the afternoon session of Innofest Unbound Day 1. We have an action-packed afternoon for you before we take to An Siang Hill for the urban experience this evening. Next up, I'd like to welcome to the stage a special guest, Mr. Chan Heng-chi, Ambassador at Large for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Singapore, and his panel, Is Your City Smart Enough? Welcome to the stage.
Hi. Oops.
Wow. Oh, please.
Hi. Well, good afternoon. Oof. Good afternoon. This is the session on Is Your City Smart Enough? I am Chan Heng-chi, and I'm an ambassador at large at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. With me on this panel to discuss Is Your City Smart Enough is Bruno Lanvin, who is president of the Smart Cities Observatory at IMD in Lausanne. There is Sri Kumar, adjunct senior fellow at the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. Then next to him is the chief executive of the Singapore Land Authority, Tan Boon Kai. And the last person, but not least, is Derek Tan, who is the executive director of engineering and professional services in the Asia Pacific at SenseTime. SenseTime, a technology company that does face recognition and all that. This is a very diversified panel and eminently suitable to discuss smart cities. Smart is a buzzword, and all of you are here because you want to know more about smart, how to do it, how not to do it, and what you must do to make your city smart. We have only 35 minutes, so let me start with the questions. And each speaker will have about 5 minutes, and then we'll try to do an exchange of views. Bruno, let me begin with you. You have just, IMD and SUTD have just brought out a book, 16 Shades of Smart, How Cities Can Shape Their Own Future. If you're fast, there are books behind. And 50 copies, once they are gone, they are gone. And there is a Smart City Index, a preview, and these two smart city things, 16 Shades and the preview of the index is being launched at the Smart City Summit and at Innofest Unbound. Bruno, why build smart cities? Also, what are the characteristics of smart cities? And if you were to write a blueprint to build a smart city, what would it look like? Just start, choose what you want to answer.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Indeed, the reason why we decided to call this book when SUTD and IMD decided to bring it together, 16 Shades of Smart, is that there is much more than one way to be smart, and every single city around the world has something to tell us about what they've been trying to do, what they succeeded at, what they failed at. It's a very rich pool of experience that we have ahead of us. The building of smart cities is going to be one of the most dynamic areas for investment, for research, for experimentation in the years and decades to come. Whether there is a blueprint or not is debatable, but we feel that there is a need to measure better what has been done so far and to identify ways in which some of the cities have been more successful than others, as possible guidelines for others and as a source of inspiration. So the 16 cases contained in this book and in the preview of the index are just a sample of what should become quickly something like around 100, possibly more in the future, giving us a broad range of experiences and ways to appreciate such experiences. So to come back to your question, Professor Chan, what we see is that indeed the question is my city smart enough? The idea being that maybe you should not be too smart. Maybe there are ways in which you can improve the lives of citizens, and there are others where you reach a limit, you reach diseconomies of scale, you reach diseconomies in the way the buy-in from population is accepting. And one of the key issues, just to take one example, is face recognition and surveillance cameras on our streets. How much of that do we want? We want some of it because we believe that safety is important. We don't want too much of it because it would be seen as the limitation to our freedom. That's one of the many, many examples. So again, we have a huge pool of experience to look at. But if I had to single out one recipe for those who have succeeded, let me summarize it as with the following sentence. Being a smart city is not an end in itself. You have to start from a goal. You have to start from a problem. You have to start from an issue you want to address. So if your issue is traffic, if your issue is waste management, if your issue is corruption, if your issue is any kind of the problems we see in cities around the world, then that should become your goal. And everything you do to build smart cities has to be geared to that goal. And last but not least, you should give your citizens, who are the end beneficiaries of that, the ability to assess how well you fared on that road to reaching that objective.
Thank you, Bruno. So you are saying to be smart, you can use technology, but it is not enough. Technology alone does not make you smart. You have to answer the citizens' needs and how you use the technology to solve the problem at hand. Now, Sri, let me come to you. You want to elaborate on this?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Prof. Chan. And I think Bruno has raised some interesting issues about how a smart city should eventually benefit the citizen. But how is this seen in tangible terms? And why should we build a smart city? I mean, Prof. Chan raised this as the fundamental question. Well, there are very good reasons. When a city is smart, it becomes more efficient. And how does it mean to you and me staying in a house? Well, the power system becomes more reliable. There's energy efficiency. You will have better transportation and connectivity. You will have a mix between private and public capabilities and flexibility in how land is used, for example. My colleague here will talk about land later. But look at you and me today. What we used to do 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you filled out a form for your income tax. Now you don't have to. That data is available and is sent to you computed. Look at your CPF statements. They are all available online. You can do all those transactions. So if you look at financial intermediation, how banks have become technologically savvy, all these things happen because a city decides it wants to be smart. It wants to put in the fundamental infrastructure that allows these transactions to take place seamlessly and without friction. So I want to go back to what Prof. Chan raised as a second question. What are the characteristics you have of a smart city? Well, you need an incredible ecosystem. And in the case of Singapore, we are unique because everything is seamlessly connected from the national to the municipal to the individual. Many other countries, it's not. The national, the municipal, and the individual are quite often disconnected. But in the work that we have done in case studies, we show that in Asia in particular, it is the interlinked capabilities between the national and the municipal that makes a difference. So if you look at a smart capability, you will find that the national government would have put in an enormous amount of money to build a broadband network. Without a broadband network, none of this smartness will work. That is the fundamental requirement. Second thing, which comes together with this, fantastic mobile telephony. Mobile telecommunications has to be cheap and accessible. So countries which are, part of the developing stage, you take in Southeast Asia, you find that they are able to adapt and use technology because all of a sudden telecoms is cheap. You go to some of the, what do you call, the third world cities, everybody has 2 phones. One to connect with the family, one for all the other relationships. So this, together with an effervescent private sector, is what makes a smart city operate at an efficient level, both the government and the public sector working. It's interesting that in some countries you will find that the effervescence is what causes government to become efficient. In others, the efficiency of government drives the onset of a smart technology.
You've already touched on governance now.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. Does governance matter in the making of a smart city?
That's a very relevant question in this. And just to tell you, I actually prepared a question answer.
1 minute, just 1 minute.
Thank you. I have a very good judge here. Cities that have strong administrative cultures will find it easy to implement because the bureaucracy is able to implement policies with rapidity. And the trick then is to get citizen involvement. When citizens get involved, you find that the whole ecosystem works rather well. That's when you have a strong centralized authority able to implement. What happens to cities which don't have that? This is strange because this is the paradox of smart cities. When a city implements smart technologies, the individuals become participants in this process. The asymmetry of information between the public and the private sectors goes off. Therefore, an individual, the citizen, becomes more of an active partner, insists that the government services be delivered on time, insists that problems be resolved, floods, information. So the efficiency of governance is forced to be upped by the bureaucracy. So you find that governance has a fundamental role in how smart cities operate, and it works in 2 ways. Efficient governance helps smart cities. In countries which are less so, the smart cities force you to become more efficient.
Right. Now, I'll come to Boon Khai. Boon Khai, you're a civil servant here, right?
I'm the
you
only
run the
civil
Stat
servant.
Board. Now, tell me, we are asking the question of why smart cities and the blueprint for a smart city. Share with us how you think Singapore did the blueprint to create the smart city.
I think Singapore is in a
And what can we do better?
I think Singapore is in a fairly unique position. It is a city, but it is also a country at the same time. The thing I find about smart cities, first and foremost, if you look around the world, and I think this book validates very much of what you say, smart cities or building smart cities is not a competition. It is not about who is the best. The definition of smart is really up to the country or the city to decide for itself. It is subjective. So really, at the end of the day, when Singapore sees the definition of a smart city, like our Prime Minister has said yesterday, it is about how it impacts the lives of citizens, how it improves the daily lives of the person walking on the streets. It is not always about the big bang, what you change the world is, but it is about the small incremental steps. So from a government perspective, if you talk about what the blueprint should be, my argument would be to have the solid foundation on which we believe a smart city is based. In our case, we believe that that comes from geospatial or land data. Position data which allows people to know where they are, to make decisions about the things around them, the people around them, the places around them, to be able to consider carefully what course of action next. Now, on top of that, you can obviously layer many other different technologies, many other platforms, many other different permutations of things that you can do. But visibility to data, understanding your environment is quite critical. In the past, I think when we go out, to visit a new city, we step out of the hotel and we think to ourselves, okay, where next? Now you don't do that. With an app, with all the information around, you can say, in the morning, I'm going to visit this museum, in the afternoon, I'm going to visit this restaurant, and so on. So the quality of your life, so decision making improves tremendously. But it also goes beyond that. Now, I think we are in a bit of a fortunate situation because in Singapore, we've been consistently having good data collected over the last 100, 200 years. So now we are at this transformation where we think of how we can proliferate such data out into the market. So in Singapore, we have what we call a One Map, which is produced by the government, it's produced by the Land Authority. We produce a free map where then businesses, citizens can draw on the APIs, develop products and services that can serve the needs of others. That's just one example. Another example, some of you may have heard, is about the Municipal Services app. It's an app created by government, completely free of charge, where it allows the citizen to interact with the government, to tell us what issues are there on the ground. It could be a broken street lamp, it could be a fire, it could be garbage on the ground. And all the citizen needs to do is just to tell us where it is, and back end, we will solve the problem. So this interaction between the citizen and the government becomes pretty much seamless. And we think that that is actually a way that we can define how smart a city is. Obviously, I think the question for us is not so much of are cities smart enough, but can cities be smarter or can countries be smarter? And I think the answer is obviously yes.
Do you feel Singaporeans, generally, enough of them are using those apps that you talk about? You know, you've got all these marvelous apps, but how many are using? And I'm sure we could want more.
Well, I think, again, it comes back to the point, we want to encourage, and the
Yes.
reality today is that we are all bombarded by so many different applications, all for different reasons. At our level, really, from the government's perspective, first is to raise the awareness. I mean, technology is a tide that you can't really stop, right? Sooner or later, you come. The young today grow up not so much writing, but doing homework on iPads, on computers, and so on. So they have an instinctive sense.
Yes.
But the older generation, we do feel sometimes needs a little bit of help to do that. And that's we are also concentrating some effort, whether it's through outreach programs and so on, to actually raise this. So perhaps the answer is yes, I think more can be done, but it is really something that government is quite focused on.
Thank you. Derek, you deal with technology. I have heard many mayors say, we adopt technology, but we worry that our technology goes obsolete. What do you say to that? Because technological change is so fast, and if you're not a rich city, when the changes come, what do you do? Have you an answer for that?
Yeah, basically, the city has evolved, technology has evolved from the past 20 years from a smart city angles. So in the past, governments is building big cities, big system, trying to control and manage in terms of the surveillance, the sensoric fabrics and things like that. So this involves huge amount of cost. How do you manage? Basically, just now Boon Khye mentioned in terms of the apps, One Map. Most people, I believe, are using Apples or Google when they do navigation. So cooperation between government, citizen, and private entities is what I see is the answer to ensure that the technology keep on evolving. Government investment sometimes has to ensure the compliance, the governance. So it bounds to have certain restriction in the technology factors. And by working with private entities, this restriction in terms of the growth, for example, AI, artificial intelligence, would enable certain technology to move further, to go beyond. At the same time, how do we control, how do we govern, how do we ensure privacy and securities?
Yeah.
So these are the things we also have to factor together. So that's what I mean in terms of citizens, governments, and private entity has to provide the blueprints for smart cities. Initially, when smart city came out, it's all managed or driven by technology companies. And then use case, as just now Bruno has mentioned, is very important. So as I navigate from my past life, I've seen cases where government has certain restriction for sustainabilities and environmental sustainabilities in terms of waste management. So there is a regulation. So company will come in to provide a solution, put in the sensor to control in terms of the waste measurement and so on and so forth. So by having the regulation in place, private entities can come in to develop the necessary solution. And at the same time, citizen has to come in to embrace it. For example, in France, in Lyon, they have a lighthouse project whereby the government talks to the citizen how they want to build that particular Grand Lyon's area. So they work together, and they save a lot of energy. We retro-treated about 35,000 meter square of properties to make it environment friendly. So this citizen embrace. Ultimately, how a smart city function is the quality of life of the citizen, the connectivities, the ease of freedom. I use on my smartphone, I know where I want to go as a tourist, as a citizen. The connectivities, usage, the use case is pretty important to drive. And then with the use case, you put in the technology factors. And then people will use it, people quality of life is improved, city competitiveness, growth is there. At the same time, environment sustainability. These are the three main points that I'm...
Well, thank you for emphasizing the partnership that's necessary between government, the people, and business, you know. So I think it's the concept that we're all moving towards. Nobody now talks of just, you know, technology or government doing it. It's really a partnership. And people are very important, and their inputs in the shaping of the technology. Let me just follow up with another question, Derek. You are selling technologies, you watch other companies sell technologies. What technologies are cities in Asia buying?
So in the past 5 years, 10 years, cities are looking into surveillance, CCTVs for traffic management, for security purposes, and so on and so forth. The last 5 years, 3 to 5 years, I'm seeing a lot of sensor. Government is building sensor fabrics to collect data. So at the back end is how you crunch the data, how to provide insight for citizens, for government management, for sustainability management. Whatever regulation you put, for example, waste, how do you measure? So you must have enforcement to measure, and then penalization to errant company that exploit it. So all these will work together, and moving forth, what I see is in terms of artificial intelligence coming in to automate processes, improve productivities. At the same time, in a way, what I'm looking at smart city is giving citizens or myself 25 hours a day. So it's not literally, everyone is restricted by 24 hours. With the concept of additional hour with technology, for example, my traveling time congestion is reduced because proper management of the roads. I can plan when I go and take a Grab, a taxi, or a bus with the apps. So within the time as I'm waiting for my cab, I can do other things. So in this manner, empower citizens to have 25 hours is what I see a success to a citizen from that angle, productivity gains.
Bruno, I'd like to come back to you. You know, we've been talking of what governments can do, the partnerships. Is it important that you are a first mover in technology, or is there some advantage to being the late starter? You know, should you be the first mover or the late starter?
This is a very valid question, because many of the technology companies, like Derek's, for instance, are offering services which are typically at the edge. That is, almost after they come out of research, they are turned into a product that cities may wish to use. So this question of whether you want to be among the first movers or wait a little bit until others have tried it becomes even more relevant. It's even all the more relevant when you deal with large cities, as you just mentioned, Derek. That is because then the budgets are in billions, and you cannot go wrong. So it's public money. I would like to, however, give a different light on this picture. That is the first mover versus the second mover, the big cities versus the smaller cities, by underlining one element, which is agility. That is the reason why we are giving so much attention to smart cities. One of the reasons why is that, of course, the majority of people around the planet live in cities and will live in cities more and more, but also because we have reasons to believe, and not just to believe, we can measure it, that cities are more agile than nation states. Of course, Singapore being a city-nation, city-state, it's a different kind of exception. But generally, you have this choice to make between, are you going to do something at country level or at city level? And then cities have proved much more able to grasp new technologies, new solutions, than nations would have been able to. The only point I'd like to underline is that we should also give due attention to what's happening away from the big urban centers. In this book, we have examples of small cities like Bilbao in Spain, 250,000 inhabitants. They are experimenting with a number of things which are at the edge, which may not be mature for bigger entities, but may also help us see the future.
Thank you. 1 minute, Sri.
Okay.
Late starter, you know, the first mover, late starter, and the question is, can you correlate smart cities with competitiveness?
Good. Thank you, Prof. Chan. I think it's important to realize that when a city is rich and is of a reasonable medium size, it will always go to become a first mover. It must. There is no stepping back because it'll have the opportunity to experiment. And if you don't try that, you're not going to be doing the kinds of, because the further up the ladder, the marginal increases get thinner and thinner. So you need to get to the best technology to push you ahead. That's the reason why we are doing autonomous. We are small. We are doing autonomous vehicles. I mean, many other countries will talk about it, but will not have the capacity to do it. For us, it's leading edge. So to answer the question, yes, you're small, you're rich, you should go for what you call leading edge technology and become a first mover. We have been, by the way, first mover even before technology came. ERP, the manual ERP, when the policeman was standing by the gantry, we did it first. It's smart, not technology intensive. Let me come to the next question that Prof. Chan raised. Can we correlate smartness with competitiveness? And
You have 40 seconds.
I have 40 seconds. 40 seconds, okay. Let me answer. Well, it's very difficult because it's early days yet, because there's no way cities measure their general GDP. Countries do. But we do know that the ecosystem becomes more efficient when smart technologies are introduced. So we will see in the years to come how cities themselves, because of the lower friction for transactions, become more efficient. Therefore, the value added improves, and it will be shown in distribution of income slightly better, and therefore highly more competitive. It's early days, but it's coming. In some of the work we have done, we can see elements of it, but we're not ready to have a metric for that.
Boon Khai, what do you think? You know, what advantages do you have for being a smart mover, and does it matter? Because leapfrogging happens if you're a late developer or late second mover.
It's true. I think Singapore being small, sometimes being an early developer helps, because you can't be a late mover and start to scale up. But really, at the end of the day, that's no one size fits all. It's really a balance between testing out some things that are relatively new, or looking at examples of countries and then looking at what they are doing and following. I mean, we have a lot of examples and good examples of developing countries who have become smart in their own way, and which are prime examples for other developed countries to follow. So again, I come back to a short answer, no one size fits all. It really depends on what issues is facing the country, what problems the country needs to solve, how it correlates to the citizen on the ground, the man on the street, how that relates to the governance that the country wants to do, and how you build that entire ecosystem. So that's my thought.
Yeah. Derek, this question is on security of technology. We are, bringing more and more technology into our lives, but sometimes you get this nightmare scenario where suddenly things don't work, either because somebody hacked your system or it just doesn't work. So how do you actually ensure the protection of the technology, the security of the technology?
So basically, every system you design from Citizen has to be secure. How do we ensure the data, the information are not leaked, are not hacked? So security design in terms of when you build a system has to be in place. At the same time, these are the gatekeepers. How you use it. If you share your password to other people, then you will be breached. Data will be leaked from your own perspective. Citizen, government, the usage, the people who use it has to ensure that the data are not, system has a certain boundary of security. People that use it have to also come into place to ensure. If you are looking at surveillance, governance has to come. How do you restrict certain individual for certain data that shouldn't have any preview? How do you protect citizen information, like European GDPR? So these are government's framework to ensure the data that is not being leaked or being secure. So system has its role, but also governance aspects and the people who use it has to play a part in all this.
Thank you. Now, I have a minute left, and I'd like to use that time for myself. If I may summarize, what has been said, and taking into account what this book, which is 16 Shades of Smart, 16 case studies from Europe, from Latin America, and 6 Asian studies, 6 Asian cases. If you look at the book and read through the smart case studies, there's something that's common with cities that are smart. They are smart and smarter and smartest. You have to decide which are the smartest. But it seems to me they all begin with some form of building the broadband access. The infrastructure is extremely important. Building the ICT infrastructure, the networks. Then governments, after that, decide to employ whether it's data, big data, cloud computing, they put in sensors, it's collecting more and more data. Some do it better than others. And there are countries, there are cities, which then move on to using this data and trying to spring off and start smart economies. That is, companies that are built on, smart technology. And I think we're all trying to get there. But the one lesson which was emphasized, and actually I'm chairman of the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities, so I kind of know what's going on there. One fact that is emphasized is that in this journey to be smart, most of the cities really begin with, they're smart and they're just simple solutions in planning that is smart. Because I remember being in a smart cities conference in Shanghai, and a mayor said to me, does it mean if I have money and I'm the richest city, I can buy the most technology, I'm the smartest? What if I use my resources well? So really, when you think about smart, it's using resources. And in today's world, how do you use your resources? Whatever little resources you have, because not every city is very wealthy, how do you use it best to improve the lives of your people? And smart is connected to sustainability. I think in today's, all your indices, everybody ties smart with sustainability. How do you use smart technology to build this sustainable city, and how to make it livable? And I think the index that is being prepared emphasizes all this. Well, thank you very much, and you've been a very good audience.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, and your panel. We're honoured to have you all.